Okay, so let me walk you through what's changing in the sector, because I'm, old enough to be your mum probably, or most of you, for most of you. And as I said, I entered the profession in the 1990s and computers didn't exist. What a different world we live in now. Okay, technology, plays such a central role in all our day-to-day activities, and the legal sector is not immune from that. Okay, it's absolutely everywhere, and law firms are having to respond. But it's not just technology. The market has changed considerably in that, yes, the magic circle still exists, but back then the silver circle certainly didn't exist. And the other big change is the prevalence of US law firms in London. When I was training at Linklaters, there just weren't really any US law firms that you could apply to for traineeships, whereas now they are seen very much as direct competitors to the larger city law firms. Okay, another key change, of course, is that some of the firms that existed, like Eversheds, like Rag & Co, they've done mergers with US players and are now very much transatlantic law firms. Okay, and then of course you've also got the big four accountancy firms, which are now thinking, well, hang on a minute, we've got a decent client following, we do auditing for so many different businesses, why don't we extend our service provision to cover law? So the market is really, really busy in that there's a lot of competition, and that means that law firms are having to become a lot more innovative in the way they offer services to their clients. And I say services because back then it was just legal advice, whereas now firms are having to be a lot more creative as to how they can add value. What else could they be doing to keep clients loyal? Okay. Another important change, and this has been in the news quite a lot, is the different generations that now work within a law firm. So you'll have people who, like you, are digital natives and are very, very tech savvy. And then you've got people like me who have had to, go on jump on a very steep learning curve and become more tech savvy. But we also have different life goals and ambitions and priorities. And of course, working styles, because I remember now I probably don't really have a paper notepad very often, because I'll either record myself a voice note or I'll be typing into my phone or tablet or laptop, whereas back then you would be doing mostly paper-based work. Okay, so that's different. But in terms of life ambitions, back then when I entered the profession, I really did see myself as a future partner within a law firm, whereas now some of you may come into the profession seeing it as a great way to gain lots of transferable skills and then use that to move on to become an entrepreneur, for example. And then finally, no session would be complete without mentioning the pandemic. And the good news is that the legal sector fared really, really well during the pandemic, and law firms reported, record years in terms of how much money they billed to clients. But the biggest change is really the work from home and flexible working models. Okay, and now most large law firms and indeed smaller firms will operate hybrid working models. But that does mean that as future generations of lawyers, you need to be a bit more versatile in the way you communicate with colleagues, because you may find that you need to do more communication virtually. So you might do virtual meetings rather than in-person meetings. But it also means that you need to be able to work autonomously more quickly in your careers, because there will be days when you'll be working from home, or you might be in the office, but your supervisor is working from home. And that suits some people, whereas others might prefer to be in a business that's working in the office every day of the week. That being said, sorry, I must have typed the word but without my glasses on, because it should have been a but, not a BJT. Anyway, look, it's not all changed. The legal sector is conservative with a small c. And I have to say that they're not always ahead of the curve when it comes to embracing innovation, change, etc. And that means that there is a lot of stuff that feels remarkably similar to what it was like when I was a trainee solicitor and a junior lawyer, okay? And the first point to highlight is that, you know, as a lawyer, you'll be working in the services industry, okay? Meaning that, you know, the client is king. If they ask you to jump, you jump, okay? And they are becoming more demanding in that they want really good value for money. They want commercial advice. You know, private practice lawyers, so those working in law firms, are often criticized for sitting on the fence or, you know, being barriers to change. And what clients are after from their lawyers is pragmatic advice that factors in risk, and that doesn't simply say, no, you can't do that, okay? And in terms of the core lawyering skills, the ones I've got listed on this slide are still very, very important. So analytical skills, commercial awareness, and of course, attention to detail. Those are a given, and I don't see that ever changing, okay? Irrespective of how much work is done virtually, how much it is done by robots, how much of it is done on paper, how much of it is done remote on computers, okay? Other changes are, you know, this approach to work-life balance, flexible working, etc. But fundamentally, and not everyone is going to be honest with you about this, working in big law in a commercial environment where you've got sophisticated clients will, in some instances, require you to work long and unpredictable hours, okay? So it's really worth your while having an appreciation for this so that you know what you're buying into, okay? And if I'm being brutally honest with you, I guess one of the reasons why I decided to quit big law is because I'd underestimated just how much demand there would be on me, both mentally and physically. And for various health reasons, I had to sort of call it quits, okay? And you know, this is a really important consideration, okay? So another skill, for example, is resilience, connected to the long hours. So let's look at tech in a bit more detail, okay? And particularly AI, okay? I don't need to teach you to suck eggs because you probably know more about AI than I do, given, you know, what I said about how old I am. But in the context of law firms, what lawyers are looking at is, and it can be an opportunity or a risk. In other words, can lawyers work be handled just as effectively by robots or by machine, okay? And the simple answer is that more technology is featuring in the way legal work is done. And the most common feature you'll see is in the context of due diligence and disclosure. So that is work that a lot of trainee solicitors are involved in. And it essentially means reviewing large volumes of documents to unearth potential showstoppers, deal breakers, or something that might require a price reduction in the context of a merger or takeover. Okay, and I remember back in the day when I was involved in a due diligence exercise, I would be locked away in a dark room with folders lined up against, you know, wall-to-wall shelves with folders, like lever arch folders, okay? And we'd need to go through them and review them, literally page by page. And that now is very much done, but remote, you know, through technology, with technology, meaning that it can be done more efficiently. And it also means, hopefully, that lawyers who would have been stuck doing that sort of work can move on to do some stuff that's a little bit more sophisticated, okay? But it's not just about document heavy tasks. Some firms are going further, and there is one firm that has developed an in-house piece of tech that enables them to advise clients on whether or not to go ahead with pursuing a claim against a competitor or someone who they've fallen out with, okay? And the way that works is that they use algorithms to predict the outcome of the case that's at stake based on what's happened with cases that were similar. So it's essentially algorithms mimicking what a lawyer would do in the olden days, where you're looking for precedents, okay? Because as you know, we operate in the common law system. You know, judges are, cases are determined both by what it says in the statutes, but also what it says in case law and what's happened in previous cases with similar facts and figures. So how does technology in the legal sector impact trainees or future trainees? Okay, as I've already touched upon, with the more routine tasks being automated, you know, so disclosure, due diligence, etc., I'm hoping that it means that you will be able to get involved in more engaging work or client-focused work. And the word that, or the phrase that so many junior lawyers like to use, i.e. you'll be given a little bit more responsibility, okay? But it's also important for you to make sure that you stay abreast of what's going on, okay? So have a general awareness of what's new, you know, what's trending, what's everyone talking about. It's also worth your while having a decent understanding of any related jargon, okay? Because that will help you differentiate yourselves from other candidates, okay? But I often get asked by students, do you think I should go off and do a coding course? Controversially, I'm going to say no. I don't think it's essential, unless, of course, you feel that it's something you will genuinely enjoy doing, because I'm all in favor of, you know, investing in your professional development, but it's certainly not compulsory. And it is worth being mindful of how rapidly tech evolves, okay? You just need to look at the number of iPhones that have come out since the first one was launched many, many years ago. You know, there's Apple seems to be launching new products with new, you know, bits of gadgetry every year, sort of thing. And, you know, that's why there's no point at this stage in your careers to become experts on certain products or platforms, because you may find that by the time you actually start your training contract or other form of qualifying work experience, that the what you know is now out of date, okay? Another point worth bearing in mind is whether or not, if robots do take over much of the work that lawyers do, then do law firms need to recruit as many people? So do keep an eye on what firms are doing with regard to how many graduate places they have. I've not seen a huge reduction in the number of trainee solicitors law firms are recruiting. But what I am seeing is that the talent for the best candidates is raging. And this is where, you know, if you can make yourself a standout candidate, there's no reason why you couldn't, you know, end up with multiple offers by the time you finish your degree. Let's return to the old school. As I said, the legal sector is very, very conservative with a small c, and the change can be quite slow, right? And that's why it's important to, you know, focus on some of the points I'm going to raise now, because yes, you can all go around saying that you're tech savvy and you know how to code, but fundamentally, okay, law firms are going to test you on some of the following areas, okay? So legal knowledge and your ability to research, that was something that, you know, where there was a lot of overlap between my law degree and what I was doing as a trainee, okay? Because I can tell you now that the work that you do, particularly in a commercial law firm, is very different to what is covered in the academic study of law, okay? But research is really, really important. But it's not just about, you know, working your way through case law or statutes. What's really important is to be able to know where to look for the answer, how to analyze and process the information you're going to glean, and then to be able to present that in language that's going to be a lot more simple for the client to understand. And I found this quite challenging. I'm going to be honest with you. I struggled in the very early stages of my career to read lengthy cases, statutes, legal documents, whether that's a contract, a lease of some description. And, you know, now through practice, I can flick through a document really quite quickly and work out what are the most salient points, Okay, so it is a skill that will take time to develop, but the more you practice, the better. And in terms of presenting the information in plain English, writing skills are also very, very important. And I do find from reading the way some students write that they do need to put a bit more effort into it, because there is a distinction between academic writing, the way you would, prepare an essay, versus business writing. And there's a balance to be had between writing that's very formal and writing that looks like it should be in a WhatsApp message, okay? And I do feel that English has become a lot more relaxed. And now, for example, I can start an email even to a client saying, hey, how are you, right? Whereas back then, emails would start, letters, not emails, letters would start with the centered dear sirs, okay? So that, thankfully, we have to move away from, because frankly, it sounds a bit sexist. But, language has become a lot more informal, but not to the point that it's going to be appropriate for you to use some of the sort of emojis and, abbreviations that you might use in social media, okay? So if you want to do yourself a favor, it is worth practicing your writing skills. And whether you do that through, entering competitions or, writing blogs, that would help, okay? So aside from your knowledge of the law and then being able to research law, other core business skills that are worth thinking about are commercial awareness and business acumen. In a nutshell, commercial awareness is being able to see the bigger picture. It's having an appreciation of the commercial context in which a client wants to pursue a course of action, okay? Whenever I run commercial awareness sessions for students, I ask them the following question, okay? Can you think of something that is legal but high risk, okay? Because there is a difference, okay? So for example, investing in stocks and shares is legal, but dependent on which company shares you buy, the level of risk is going to be quite different, okay? And that is what lawyers need to be able to do. They can say to the client, okay, this is legal, but very risky, or this is legal, and this is the least risky way of approaching the problem, okay? It's also having an understanding of the industries that your clients operate in. So if you join a firm, and some firms, in fact, like CMS, actually operate a sector-based system where teams are split by sectors rather than practice areas. And that means that, if you want to work for a media company, you would need to understand the backdrop in which that client operates, okay? What are the trends? What might be keeping the owners of that business awake at night? Okay, so that's business acumen. So writing and drafting I've covered already. And remember, there's a difference between writing a memo to a client and drafting a legal document, okay? And I have to say that drafting was perhaps my Achilles heel. I wasn't brilliant at it, but again, through practice, I've become a lot better, okay? Now, as well as written skills, verbal communication is also important, okay? And that doesn't mean public speaking and that's it. Some public speaking is good, and if you can get involved in debating competitions, then fantastic. But it's also having the confidence to speak in a room full of people, because you might be asked to lead a meeting or a training session, okay? And another skill which I've had to develop because of the pandemic and the fact that we now live in this hybrid world is I'm a lot more confident speaking in front of an audience when I'm there in person, because I can engage more closely with who I'm speaking to, and I can, adapt my style to suit the mood in the room, and I can watch out for clues in people's body languages. Presenting to a blank computer screen, I'm still not brilliant at it. I'm getting better. But again, that's a skill that you might want to, to work on. Others include organization and time management. But you know what? What's quite interesting is the level of organization and time management skills you need will vary. In big law, you'll find that you might only advise on one massive takeover or merger or a piece of litigation. And that was certainly what I was doing. Okay, so, but within that, there'd be various work streams, meaning that you will be spinning lots of plates in the air. Okay, so that's one form of organization. And then time management, because lots of things will have competing deadlines, etc. But if you work in a high street solicitors firm doing, let's say, residential conveyancing, you need to arguably be even more organized because you'll have lots of different clients. So you'll have more matters, but they'll be smaller. So it's up to you to decide what form of, what sounds more challenging. Having one client with lots of different things going on, or having lots of clients with lots of different things going on. Personally, I prefer having one matter, okay? And then IT and tech skills, as I've mentioned, technology is now very much dominating the way law firms operate, okay? And by the way, talking of tech and IT skills, I don't think any one of you ever needs to say in an application form or CV that you know how to use Microsoft Office. I've seen this in CVs before. It's kind of a given, okay? So those are the sort of core business skills. The other area, of course, are soft skills, which is really my sort of pet topic. Teamwork. Really important, particularly for those of you who want to pursue a career in a big commercial law firm. Less important if you want to work in a smaller high street firm where, as I've said, as a residential conveyancer, for example, you'll be working pretty much autonomously, but you'll have lots of clients. Similarly, as a barrister, and in fact, that's one of the reasons why some people pursue the bar route. You will be working as, independently on your own. So teamwork becomes less significant. Now, emotional intelligence is probably a phrase you've seen people use on social media, or you might have had other speakers mention this phrase to you. In a nutshell, emotional intelligence comprises a few different attributes. So one is having self-awareness, okay? And I'll mention this because it's really important. There are two factors that can stand in your way of success. One is your ego, and one is your blind spots, okay? If you think that you're better than you are, and trust me, I've met lots of lawyers who think they're better than they are, then that's going to hold you back, i.e. your ego. Similarly, have the confidence to get feedback from people you trust to see where your weaknesses are. So for example, I always thought I was good at networking because I'm a real people person, but I discovered actually I was terrible at it because all I ever did was talk about myself, and my listening skills are terrible. So by having the confidence to get that feedback from people I know and trust, I was able to tweak that. Another pillar of emotional intelligence or other pillars include empathy and communication skills. So, if you get to work on communication skills, that's going to really help you. And the form of communication skills I'm talking about here isn't public speaking, isn't writing or drafting. It's more about the way you engage with other people, because I'm sure all of you will be encouraged to network as much as possible, but it's hard to do that with poor communication skills. So by that, what I mean is being curious, asking open questions, and having really robust listening skills. So giving the other person time to speak, to express themselves, so they feel that they've been heard and understood. It's harder to do that than you think, because, I often would interrupt people when they're, chatting to me, and probably because I spent 10 years working as a journalist where I was essentially trained to interrupt people when I'm interviewing them, okay? Humility is also a really important skill, soft skill. No one wants to, work with show-offs or people who are really arrogant. Now, proactiveness is an interesting one. I interviewed a partner from a law firm a few months ago, and I asked him, what in your mind do you think is a common attribute that displayed by successful trainees? And he used a very funny story. He basically said to me, I don't think trainee lawyers should behave like dogs. Okay, bear with me, that there is a lot of sense in what he says. Now imagine how a dog behaves. If you throw them a stick and you ask them to fetch it, they'll go and fetch it, and then they'll expect a treat, okay? And what he means by that, when comparing that situation to the way trainees behave, is, of course, it's nice to get positive feedback and to be rewarded for a job well done, okay? But fetching the stick and expecting a reward is a bit greedy, because you're just doing the basic, okay? So what he meant by being proactive is actually spotting future issues or making suggestions about the next task or how you could add value, okay? And then I mentioned resilience. Again, I really want to emphasize this point, because working in big law is really hard work, okay? And because of the hybrid method of working, you will have to it'll be a steep learning curve, and you will be expected to work more autonomously than you may be used to. What's quite interesting is that when you do your A-levels, you are spoon-fed to a degree, and then as you do your degree, you start to become a little bit more self-sufficient, and that you can work more independently on your own. And then as a trainee, the more autonomously you can work, the better. But that level of development may come gradually for each of you. But the point I want to make is none of you are the finished products. If there are skills that I've highlighted in this slide that jump out at you because you worry that it's not one of your greatest assets or your strengths, then there is obviously time now to get to work on how you're going to cultivate those strengths or skills further. Another point worth mentioning, and this is where we can sleep easy at night, is that, yes, of course, a lot of work that lawyers do will become commoditized or will become electronic, okay? But ultimately, clients do want to work with humans, okay? And this is where your people skills really need to come to the fore, okay? So it's really important for you to think about how you're going to build meaningful relationships and networks, okay? As I've said, be curious and creative. Ask those all-important open questions. So don't assume, ask. And open questions typically start with who, how, what, tell me about, etc. Okay. As I've said, don't assume. So have that open mindset, and also do try to step out of your comfort zone, because if what you do is you cling on to the one or two things that you're good at doing, then that's going to really hold you back. Because the other key point about what holds you back, so I've mentioned ego, I've mentioned blind spots. The other one, of course, is lack of opportunity, because you don't create those opportunities for yourself, okay? What I would like you all to do is to take ownership of your professional development, okay? Make it, your responsibility to seek out opportunities that will help you to develop and, really strengthen those core skills I mentioned in my previous slides, okay? And remember, it's about practical solutions rather than telling clients what they can't do. That's what I meant about commercial awareness, okay? So be imaginative, be resourceful, think outside the box, okay? You also need to be accountable for your own work, okay? And then the final bullet point here, which again is really, really important, is having that growth mindset, okay? Taking ownership of your professional development and career progression, okay? And that comes up again and again and again, okay? And for me, it's really important for you to start working on that now, okay? And I'm going to show you a technique that you can use to help you identify those weaknesses, okay? So what I would encourage you all to do is have a stab at doing a skills audit, okay? And it can be an Excel spreadsheet, it can be on a blank sheet of paper. What I would like you to do is to have a think about all the skills that you have been able to develop or, are starting to develop, okay? Because most law firms are fairly predictable. They will publish on their early talent or graduate recruitment websites the skills and attributes they look for in their future trainee lawyers. Similarly, if you're going to be applying for a paralegaling job, there's likely to be a job spec or a person spec, okay? And one of the advantages of doing the skills audit is, it will really help you to identify what you're really good at, which is a great way of giving your confidence a bit of a boost, okay? But I don't want you to just focus only on skills that you excel at. There's got to be a bit of a marriage between what you are really brilliant at doing, but what you genuinely enjoy doing, okay? And I'll give you an example where, for me, there was a bit of a mismatch. So after I mentioned earlier that writing or drafting was one of my Achilles heels. So it's ironic that I then spent 10 years as a journalist where writing was a key feature of my day-to-day responsibilities. And now I would describe writing as one of my really big strengths, okay? But I don't enjoy doing it. For me, what I loved about being a journalist was the chase, the thrill of pursuing that story, getting the front page splash. But the writing part of it was something I'd gladly just give to someone else, okay? So in order for you to make sure, if you're still undecided about whether or not you want to be a lawyer, or you're undecided about what type of lawyer you want to be, the skills audit will really help you to determine what sort of career path you should be pursuing, okay? It will also help you to identify skills or experiences that you might otherwise miss, okay? And it will, what you don't want to do is end up in the classic situation of being a square peg in a round hole, okay? One of the big reasons why some students don't get interview invites is because what they're interested in, the skills that they want to use on a day-to-day basis in their future careers, is not a direct match for what the employer is looking for, okay? So that matching process, if you begin with the audit, will become a little bit more precise, okay? And then finally, it'll help you to identify any potential gaps in your CV. So what are those deficits, and what activities could you be pursuing to strengthen your CV, okay? So how do you go about doing your audit, okay? So you could do it two ways, okay? One is to list all your key skills. And as I say in this slide, nothing is too trivial, okay? Get input from friends, family members, fellow students, informal mentors, and just add everything, okay? And then what you can do is rate your level of expertise 1 to 10 for each one. Similarly, rate them based on your level of enjoyment, okay? Just be mindful of unconscious bias though, because you may find that you naturally say yes to things you enjoy doing because you are good at them, okay? So be mindful that you're not saying you're not telling yourself that you enjoy something because you're good at it. Similarly, don't say you don't enjoy something because you're not brilliant at it. There are loads of things that I enjoyed doing in the earlier stages of my career that I wasn't brilliant at, and I've made it, a priority for myself to really upskill in areas that I enjoy. So public speaking being one, okay? Now, the next bit is really to get rid of anything that you don't enjoy doing. And that is ultimately why I gave up journalism, because when I sat down and worked out what it is I like doing and what is it that I'm good at, the conclusion I reached was I'm a real people person. I enjoy being around other people. I'm very personable. I've got my listening skills are a lot better, and I'm quite curious. And that's how I ended up becoming a career coach, because I basically now spend my working week chatting to people about their careers, about their lives, but I don't need to go and then write it up in a news story. It's a win-win for me, okay? And so an alternative way to going down this route in terms of skills audits is, and this is helpful for those of you who perhaps lack confidence, is to create a brag sheet, okay? So this works as follows. You simply get a blank sheet of paper, and then what you can do is make a list of all your achievements and accomplishments from sort of GCSE through to your degree, or if you're a career changer in a previous career. And what you do is literally write out in a few bullet points all those proud moments in your life And then what you do is you link that to skills that you were able to acquire or develop or enhance by being involved in that activity. And this exercise is absolutely brilliant for those of you who already know that you want to become a lawyer and are preparing to fill in application forms for VAC schemes, training contracts, or want to put together a CV for a paralegaling job or other forms of qualifying work experience. And because you'll find that a lot of application forms, refer to competencies. And one of the most common rookie errors that candidates make when filling in application forms that have competency style questions is they make sweeping statements about how good they're at certain things. But what the employer is really after is a memorable and relevant example of an activity or an accomplishment that you've been involved in that has helped you, as I said, to build that skill up from scratch or to develop it further. Okay, and you'll find that the more specific the examples are, the more relevant and recent they are, the most memorable they're likely to be, and that's what's going to get you noticed. In fact, let me give you one tip here. If when answering a competency style question, or indeed questions about your motivations for pursuing a career in law, if the answer you come up with can be used by your friends, then it's too generic. It'll sound quite underwhelming, and the interviewer will probably think, yep, you've just picked that out of an interview tips handbook. So by doing this brag sheet, I hope that you'll come up with quite unique examples that you can insert into either your application forms or into a competency question when doing a job interview. So let me discuss the matching process in a bit more detail. So remember what I said about the specific examples and achievements, okay? So match that with skills or competencies listed by the employer in their graduate recruitment literature, okay? And if you have identified gaps, which I'm sure most of you will have some at this stage in your studies, because none of you are ready, you're not finished product, you're not qualified solicitors yet. Think about what activities you can get involved in that will help you to close that gap. One of the brilliant things about being at university is that there are so many different clubs and societies that you can be involved in, and they don't all have to be relevant to law, okay? So if you are someone who's quite introverted and who is, not massively outspoken, have you thought about getting involved in sort of amateur dramatics, okay? If you feel that your commercial awareness is lacking, could you get involved in a commercial awareness boot camp? What about summer jobs? What about hobbies that you could pursue independently away from university? Just to give you an idea of some of the things that I got up to when I was approaching my TC applications. So I developed my business skills and business acumen or commercial awareness through a few different activities, including helping my dad run his Indian restaurant. Okay, so I was involved in everything from, liaising with suppliers through to designing the menu. I also sold double glazing as a holiday job. Understanding how sales works is brilliant because, even understanding basic principles like the bottom line was really helpful. Okay, failing that, you could also, do some reading in your own time. Okay, so whether that's signing up for alerts to see what's coming up on, in the business news is really helpful for commercial awareness. Another one that I did more recently when I needed to practice presenting to a blank computer screen was I did a virtual stand-up comedy show for friends and family. It wasn't very funny, but it was a very enjoyable experience, and it did make me all that more comfortable talking to a camera. Okay, so do have a think about what you can be doing. But I would suggest that you get involved in activities because you are naturally drawn to them, and let the skills follow, because you'll find that it'll be a lot more enjoyable and less stressful. But then there are certain activities which, for me, are just seen as needs must. So yes, I've covered this. Okay, so as I said, if you're already in a job, speak to your line manager and see what else you can be taking on. Consider further study, internships, part-time jobs. Law firms now have insight days, You know, they've got loads of activities that they do via various mentoring programs, social mobility initiatives, etc. Hobby, sport, and then self-learning. As I said, you could read a book. It's as simple as that. And then finally, be creative, okay? What you mustn't do is constantly compare yourself to others, okay? I don't think there's nothing wrong with doing that every now and again. In fact, I found that doing it within reason was helpful, because what I was looking for was inspiration from people around me. What parts of their behavior, or you know, the way they present themselves in a challenging situation, could I potentially adopt when I'm in a similar position? Okay. And I found that much of my learning was actually done through osmosis, meaning that just by listening and watching, I was able to develop a more professional sounding sort of voice. By that, I don't mean my accent, I just mean the way I interacted with senior colleagues, with clients, okay? As I've already highlighted, do stuff because you really enjoy it, and the skills will follow, I promise you, okay? And it's also worth reminding yourselves, okay, that in many instances, okay, your deficit is really down to a lack of opportunity, okay? And there is a difference between not having the opportunity to do something versus being, you know, fundamentally bad at something. I do believe that with a little bit of time invested in activities, most of us can become better at lots of activities. We may never become professional footballers or dancers or musicians, but you can certainly up your game in many of the skills I've been talking about this afternoon. Anyway, so that's my presentation over. We've got 15 minutes because I wanted to open up the chat so that we can do a bit of a Q&A.